when you're working with these early periods, you've got another problem, particularly when you're working with this period when they were making these tiny implements. Now, these microliths are often less than 2 centimetres long if they're complete, and they're often broken. So if you're, normally what we would do would be trowel off the surface if it's quite thin and if there's a lot of archaeological material in it, even if it's in a disturbed context. But in this case, we were religiously sieving through a 3mm sieve all the topsoil, because we didn't think we were going to find anything more, you know. And as the material came off this trench, now the topsoil came off, it became very obvious that there was one patch where things were a little bit different. Now, obviously, the area had suffered very heavily from ploughing, and actually there was a lot of what you would call potato rigs, you know, running across. You could see the bottoms of them there. But there was this one area where there was this black soil, and it was fairly obvious by the time we got into the second week that this actually was in place, undisturbed soil. Sometimes we use the word occupation soil from this particular period, the Mesolithic period. And then we removed this area of black occupation soil. And that's when it really became clear that there was a hollow there and that there were all these little round black marks through it. There's a very, very dark area in the centre of it, and running around the edge of the hollow we could actually see quite a significant number of these black spots, you know. And I can remember standing there saying, "Oops, we probably have got a hot site here." Actually, it was 2 or 3 days before I said to anyone. And I always remember Mike Bailey, who was working with me on the site, and Mike suddenly saying, "There's a circle there now of post holes," and I'm going, "Yeah, you know, I meant to tell you that," but I was thinking, you know, they often say, you know, the one thing, you know, one of the greatest challenges in life is to get what you wish for, and here I was with what I'd always wished for, you know. And as we dug down in the remnants of some of the other fireplaces, we discovered that we had fragments of burnt bone. Now, you have to understand that this area, the soils, in fact most of Ireland, the soils are very acidic, which means that there's no good preservation of organic remains, bones of animals in particular. And so it was only the fact that they kept chucking all the bones of fish and various animals onto the fire, they got burnt, and they created a little sort of micro environment that they all preserved each other, if you like. Now, only as burnt fragments. But we suddenly realised that up until then we had a few bones out of some of these midden sites, but very, very little. So suddenly there we at least the opportunity of reconstructing something. So what we had to do was, I said, we had been sieving through 3mm mesh sieves, and we'd realised by this stage that doing that was impossible with this stuff because there was so much information there. So we put a lot of this in bags to take back to the Ulster Museum, where we actually used 1.5mm mesh and what's called 850 micron mesh. That's 0.85 of a millimetre mesh sieves to actually go through all this. So we were there. Here was another dimension to it. We've got huts. We've got all these implements which we'd never been able to work out where they fitted in the Mesolithic. We'd got, we were getting lots of fish bones and animal bones. We're getting layers in 1 or 2 places of burnt hazelnut shells and all sorts of stuff. And actually, as we also sieved and washed through this material, we were beginning to get occasional burnt seeds of things as well, you know, which are very difficult to spot, as well as lots and lots of bits and pieces of flint tools. So the first thing you do is you get radiocarbon dates done. So anyway, I sent off a couple of samples, and the first one came back. We had a lab, and I still have a lab, very important laboratory down in Queens that does radiocarbon dating. So the first one came back, and it would have been, say, somewhere in the region of about 7,400, 7,500 BC. And here was me looking, because I'd been looking at the axes and saying these are like the axes the Danes are using around about 4,300, 4,400 BC. So I looked at the date and went, ha, that's obviously wrong. We'll wait until the second date comes back, and it came back at about 7,500 to 7,600 BC, and I went, yeah. And then the third one came back, and it was getting around 7,700 BC, and at which point I thought, I think I've got my chronology a little bit wrong here, because the oldest dates that we would have had at that point of Mesolithic sites, which was actually Newferry further down the Bann, would have been about 6,500 BC, maybe a little bit older than that. So we were suddenly adding an extra 1,000 years to Irish prehistory.